inspiring place to be with the whole kind of Industry 4.0 lens and the IT and robotics functions that are going here, that we see blockchain as being part of that broader macro. So yeah, I mentioned it. So we're FCA registered in the UK, one of a small number of kind of crypto blockchain firms that are on the FCA register. And our focus as a company, because we're working with large enterprise clients, is on compliance, sustainability, and kind of engineering and security around the engineering that we have. We have a pretty good reputation, hard-won reputation in the space for doing that. But I don't want to talk too much about Zumo today. Focus really is I was just on a Scottish enterprise, Scottish Development International mission to New York Climate Week a couple of weeks ago. If you look just behind the left ticker tape next to the chap here at the bell ringing ceremony, that's me at the NASDAQ bell ringing ceremony, which was quite a cool moment in my career. And I guess the really interesting thing for me is that this New York Climate Week has gone through lots of iterations over the years. There's one in London as well. Started off very kind of ESG, impact investor focused, and I think this year everybody agreed there was a transition and there was a different flavour to the week this week. In the events were hosted at NASDAQ, they were hosted at the New York Stock Exchange. They featured most of the very big, very biggest investors in the world and the biggest investors in the US. And I'd say there's been a shift probably over the last 18 months or so in terms of how US investors, who obviously drive where the capital goes in the world, around the green energy revolution. And I think the broad takeaway is that big capital has realised that this is the biggest economic opportunity in history. Whether it's, whether they're fully bought into the ESG aspects of it or not, I think from a straight, whole stone, cold hard economic point of view, it's where the money's going. And there were some fascinating examples of what's driving that. One of the key things there, and just a note on it, and hopefully it's something that Labour will look at doing here, is around the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which is helping drive down costs for companies to start manufacturing businesses, new style manufacturing businesses, smart manufacturing businesses, Industry 4.0 manufacturing businesses, which need lots of energy. And the demand for energy is driving the transition to renewables in the US at kind of rapid scale, and you're seeing that across the board. So actually, 3 trillion of investment into the clean energy transition this year. So we're just shy of the 3.5 trillion target, which we say we need to meet net zero by 2050. But that's a huge transition. Just to put that in perspective, that was under 1 trillion in 2022. So you can see the way that the money is beginning to shift into the space. So I think the economic argument around is this where the money's going has been won. Yes, we keep on seeing money going into fossil fuels because there's money to be made in a short space of time, and things like the Ukraine war happens or whatever. But overall, the longer term strategic bets are all being made around this clean energy space, and absolutely fundamental to that is the kind of suite of Web3 technologies, of which blockchain is an integral part, and hopefully dive in a little bit in terms of how blockchain can and will work with that and with AI. So just a bit of context, and obviously interesting talking about this, looking at a load of robots and the in the room over there. But this move towards Industry 4.0 focused on leveraging cyber physical systems, so leveraging Internet of Things, leveraging AI, leveraging smart grid, smart production, and moving towards Industry 4.0. We're not there yet, we're in that transition as well. But I think one of the key things to realise is that all of these technologies are very power hungry, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We all know it's something that's been used to kind of beat crypto and blockchain over the head with. It uses loads of power. But actually using lots of electricity, consuming lots of electricity, as electric cars do, is fundamental in driving demand for the renewable energy transition, because it's the only source of energy that is kind of limitless. Everything else is finite. There's a finite amount of oil, there's a finite amount of gas. Nuclear, depending on where we go with fusion, has some potential to add to that. But renewables is kind of, the demand for renewables is what will drive the transition. And China is probably the best example of that. China's still building coal power stations, but it's also investing in renewables at a rate 3 or 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world. A massive amount of transition which is being driven by demand. Probably the most successful examples of moving to electric mobility. So yeah, part of this macro, that Industry 4.0 describes having to use lots of Web3 technology. The necessity of those is that they're hungry for power, but being hungry for power isn't necessarily a bad thing because it creates demand, it creates a market, and then you can use Web3 to optimize how that marketplace functions. So things like energy trading, things like smart grids, these can only be enabled successfully through applied AI and blockchain. So we're hoping to get something circular. We're beginning to see that kind of circular effect, which we need to see to drive this forward. Yeah, and just to illustrate the point, really, it's probably the clearest graph I've ever seen in terms of the direct correlation between GDP, global energy consumption and temperature. So the three things are tied together, and what we need to do is be able to drive that energy consumption from sources that doesn't make the temperature go any higher. It's pretty much as simple as that without getting into the detail of it. But whatever we can do to satisfy the demand for energy without making the temperature go up any more than it already is. And really interesting if you start looking at this this kind of sectoral growth that you're seeing in the space, and I guess the one that's of most interest to us as people who work in the space is data centers. So far higher growth in data. So, you know, lots of industries are needing to consume more electricity, but the reality is that data centers are requiring more electricity, almost double the rate of any other sector. And what's the reason for that? Well, the reason for that isn't just AI. It's everything to do with cloud computing, with the fact that the world now pretty much runs on the cloud. It's also probably fair to say that these numbers are significantly underestimated, and that they're actually using a lot more power than we realise. The other interesting thing to note here is that the rest of the world makes up the non-US element of this makes up the vast element of where demand is going to come in. And that creates challenges in a number of different ways. So if you look at age of power grids, Europe has the oldest power grid, probably has massive amounts of data centres, also data centres being built in markets with dirty grids. So again, technology issues and issues with how you deliver this, how do we deliver grids that are fit for purpose, but also opportunity in terms of economics or what will drive the transition, not anything else. So really, really fascinating to see again China having the advantage of having a almost completely new grid which they've been able to build. Again, just a key thing. Blockchain AI is the key enabler of smart grids. You live in Texas. There's an interesting narrative at the moment around Texas making this transition to wind, successful transition to wind, etc. Texas has kind of rolling blackouts may not be the exact right word for it, but Texas is on its knees from a power perspective, and there's places in Texas where you're not controlling your aircon; it's being controlled by the power company, so that you're not putting too much strain on the grid, and that's because Texas has a very old-fashioned grid which needs AI and blockchain to help revolutionise it, to take advantage of the fact that there has been a transition to wind. So lots of factors and lots of things that blockchain and AI can help, and it is extremely complex. I think what this is the 3 trillion that I was talking about. So to reach net zero by 2050, which probably isn't ambitious enough. Average spending at 3.5 trillion. This year we hit 3 trillion, so it's actually some kind of good news. And this is like an exponential increase in the amount of money that's being spent into it. I think what investors are realising is that actually the next 5 to 15 years, if that investment is doubled or tripled, things will happen exponentially faster, and growth can happen exponentially faster. The other good news on this slide is the top one, the power sector, which is the one which needs the most addressing, is the one where we already have the technology. We know how to build wind farms, we know how to build solar, we know how to build hydro. If you can add some kind of clean nuclear into the mix, that may help things go faster. But we already know how to do the top one, so it's just about building more. There's demand. How do we build more? Stopping government subsidies for carbon-intensive industries would be a good start. And then power networks, we know how that can be improved. And again, a key part of that is through smart nets, is through smart grids, through using AI and blockchain to pull that in. So that these other areas need attention. It all needs attention. It's all about incrementality and trying to address as much of it as possible at the same time. But these two sectors here are the two that have kind of the easiest and the largest wins. They're also the two with the highest demand on them. From a UK perspective, there's an incredibly clear economic argument for the government to back transition at a kind of rate of knots here in terms of growth, in terms of driving economic growth, and that's something that we hope that we'll see in the same way that Inflation Reduction Act in the US is driving this transition. We hope to see something similar here in the UK. Just apropos of nothing very much, just because it was quite interesting to me. The other key theme there was US investors backing new tech into all these areas. So I think we understand that new tech isn't the answer. No one's going to invent something which makes all the greenhouse gases go away. It's not going to happen. But that, again, there's some incredible stuff going on in the US with huge amounts of funding going into it. So I met the founder of 12 while I was there, female founder, the chief scientific officer. She's amazing. And they just had a $645 million Series B, which is quite cool, quite a lot bigger than most people's Series B. And they're busy building this jet fuel factory, which is capturing carbon from air, mixing it with water, and they're creating jet fuel from that. So the ability to and you can see the accelerant effect as money starts flowing into the space, and also the fact that they've been able to speed up their research through AI to be able to move this forward. So there's about 20 of these globally at the moment. 4 or 5 of them have had over $500 million worth of funding. So the market is, I think the market is very rarely wrong on these kind of long-term bets. One or two of them will pay off, and it's probably a 15 to 20 year time horizon to get into large-scale production. But again, a realistic goal that air travel can be primarily being powered by fuel which is being captured from the air. That's a pretty cool use of tech. And there were some amazing projects across nuclear fusion, transport, buildings, etc. And again, the key theme on many of these was applied AI and how AI has either sped up the processes, and then some of the interesting ways that blockchain can be applied from a proofs perspective in particular. So again, you're starting to see that really kind of cycle effect. So hopefully people. I came back from the week feeling pretty optimistic, I have to say, because we need capitalism at its biggest and most most aggressive for this to happen successfully, and for it to be got behind in it. And it feels like that tipping point has now been reached. So yes, super interesting. You should definitely have a look at this company. They're pretty amazing people. So I guess the second part was again about thinking about how some of the ways that more detailed ways, or some of the ways that blockchain in particular can help with this transition. And again, I will look at this through our lens, because we have an interesting thought process around some of the tech that we've been built can be adapted to not just mitigate electricity use on the blockchain, but can be used to mitigate electricity use of AI and all the other kind of Web3 power-intensive industries. And I'll just close at the end by going through, actually used AI to pull together a quick slide, just showing all the different ways that blockchain can impact on the energy transition. And it's pretty exhaustive. I had about 5 in my head, and there's like 20 on the slide, and there was a whole load of other stuff that I pulled in that I thought was kind of an edge case. But super interesting, and hopefully sparks people's thought processes about how this applied blockchain piece can really add to it. So the brief plug for Zumo. So 2 years ago we started work on a project which is now called Zumo Oxygen. It allows companies who operate on the blockchain to measure and report on the electricity footprint of their blockchain activities, and then we allow companies to mitigate that electricity use by buying renewable energy against their footprint, and to be able to, I'll use the word offset, it's not actually an offset, it's a mitigation from a carbon accounting point of view. It wipes out your carbon footprint. With a goal that as blockchain becomes ubiquitous and uses more energy, it can be the narrative is it can be used to drive transition, because you're buying renewable energy certificates are a market instrument that basically incentivizes the transition towards renewable energy sources, and particularly effective in markets with dirty grids. we did a whole load of really, I used the royal we, I wasn't massively involved, but there was we worked with World Economic Forum, Global Digital Finance, with South Pole. We've helped set up the Crypto Carbons Rating Institute. So to pull this together with kind of academic research so that we can answer that question, how much energy does Bitcoin use? What is my energy footprint of the Bitcoin blockchain, and being able to provide some clarity around proof of work, very energy intensive, proof of stake, not that energy intensive, and really kind of make that conversation around what's crypto's part of this as a new technology and what's blockchain's part of this have a bit more depth to it than just there's nothing to worry about or it's going to set the world on fire, which is kind of the two ends of the spectrum when we started on the conversation. So in use with a number of key players and coming into focus, because I mentioned at the top of the presentation that the Inflation Reduction Act in the US and regulation is obviously another key driver. So there's kind of a bottom-up commercial piece, and there'll always be a kind of top-down regulatory aspect to what drives the transition. So under MiCA, MiCA is coming in on the 9th of December in Europe. It's the first pan-European piece of legislation for digital assets. So a lot of people in this room will be affected or in some way through the MiCA piece. Broadly, it's a good thing, because but the really interesting thing, amongst many interesting things within MiCA, is it's the first regime anywhere in the world which has mandatory sustainability disclosures as part of the legislation. So again, as a driver, we've been speaking to a relatively small subset of crypto companies that are interested in sustainability, and now every crypto company in Europe is interested in sustainability, because they won't be able to retain their European registration, their European authorization, unless they are able to provide accurate disclosures on their sites, and that applies for both layer 1 protocols and for CASPs. CASP is a crypto asset service provider. They've changed it from VASP. They mess around with the lingo, but yeah. So again, really interesting for us in that we're seeing this driver disclosures, again, probably beginning to align it with other areas of financial services, but also an opportunity for blockchain companies to own the narrative and to be able to talk constructively around that. So again, without kind of killing you with detail, we use nodes on various proof of work blockchains to calculate the energy use of a blockchain in its totality, and then we use a methodology, shared network methodology, to help an intermediary understand what their share of network electricity use is over a period of time. You can then disclose that, as we'll talk about. What we're really interested in this space is how we can start applying this to other areas, particularly AI and broadly to cloud computing. So at the moment, the cloud computing owners do an okay job. I think there's probably a bit of a grey area in terms of what they are and aren't disclosing. But it's the intermediaries, if you like. It's the people who use AI for their systems who will need to be able to kind of take ownership of what the carbon footprint of that is. And there's a few things that will drive that. So in the same way as with crypto, when we started off the Oxygen project, ETH was not quite as bad, but almost as bad as blockchain from an efficiency point of view, from an energy efficiency point of view. Post the merge, ETH electricity use is reduced by nearly 100%, so 99.5%. So there's a tech aspect and there's a kind of responsible use aspect. So with AI, from a personal perspective, you like to see AI being used on the big stuff, and there's probably a load of things that AI is being used for at the moment that are pretty irrelevant, and we could probably decide not to use it for certain things because it uses so much power. I don't know if I don't really need AI to help me write an email, for example. I'm actually okay at writing emails. There's a few other things like that. So I think there's an interesting thing there. Are we going to want to point AI and things at the bigger stuff? So we help measure. As I say, we take inputs. We need to start. We are doing work at the moment, and we may come back and ask some academic institutions about what the right way of taking inputs and understanding what an organisation's use of AI is and how we can start calculating that. That's one of our big challenges at the moment. We certainly understand how we have access to data centre reporting, But again, we want to be able to understand the electricity consumption, report on it, and provide that reporting, and then ultimately we want to be able to help companies buy renewable energy to mitigate their carbon footprint.